The white face pressed against the frosted glass window, eyes peering through the darkness. A voice without emotion echoed from behind me in the empty night. Everyone's gone. But how could that be possible when I had just heard my friend calling my name? This is the true story of what happened in a remote mountain house in Japan, and the unexplainable events that still haunt me to this day. Main story. Now let me take you back to the beginning. This happened when I had just started my career as a working professional. At that time I was part of a local outdoor club in Okayama Prefecture, which is in western Japan. We did camping, fishing, hiking, badminton. Our activities varied by day, but every gathering always ended the same way, with a drinking party. It was essentially a casual social club that used outdoor activities as an excuse to get together and have fun. On this particular day, about 7 members had gathered to plan a barbecue at a cottage in our prefecture. This cottage was quite popular locally. The building was clean, the grounds were spacious, and it even had an adjacent park where you could play various sports. Everyone was really looking forward to it. However, the day before our trip, our leader suddenly contacted us. "Sorry everyone. Actually, I couldn't get the cottage reservation, so tomorrow we'll be staying at a mountain house owned by my friend's family instead. Nobody lives there now, but it's well maintained and clean. Plus it's far from any neighbors, so we can be as loud as we want." I felt a bit annoyed that such an important change wasn't communicated until the last minute, but there was nothing we could do about it. The cottage would have to wait for another opportunity. For now, we would stay at this mountain house owned by our leader's acquaintance. The next day, we gathered early in the morning and piled into a rental car driven by our leader. There were 4 men and 3 women, including myself. The men were our leader, plus Chris, David and Eric. The women were myself, along with Amy and Beth. These were our usual group members. But since this was an overnight trip with both men and women, everyone's excitement was running high. As soon as the car started moving, Amy asked our leader at the wheel, "Where exactly is the house we're staying at tonight?" "It's in the same city as the cottage we originally planned. So tomorrow, before we head back, we can still visit the park at the cottage area to play around." "Oh, that's great news, but the house we're staying at is a bit deeper in the mountains. I only got the address, so I'm relying on GPS navigation too." Everyone nodded in understanding. "Well, at least we have somewhere to stay. It's amazing you managed to get a whole house." I remembered my buddy mentioning he had access to a place like this. His grandmother lived there until about 5 years ago, but she passed away and nobody lives there anymore. The water and the electricity are still connected though, so we can take baths and use it just like a normal house. Hearing our leader's explanation, everyone was saying things like, "How lucky." On the way there, we stocked up heavily on barbecue ingredients and alcohol, arriving at the house around 10:30 a.m. As we'd been told, it was quite deep in the mountains. Along the way we drove up steep mountain roads that made us wonder, do people actually live in places like this? The car rattled and shook as we climbed, and the remote location definitely scared the women a bit. But the house itself looked exactly like a typical rural grandmother's home. A standard Japanese house. In Japan, traditional houses are often single-story wooden structures, with tatami mat floors and sliding paper doors, called shoji. Though it was old, it was well cleaned and much more sanitary than we had expected. However, perhaps because of its location deep in the mountains, it didn't get much sunlight. Even though it was still daytime, the inside of the house was dim and felt a bit damp. Still, with the nearest house over 100 meters away, we could make as much noise as we wanted, which was perfect. At a cottage, you can't really do that. Since our group always got rowdy when drinking, I was genuinely excited. While the men were ventilating the house and preparing for the barbecue, we 3 women decided to explore the surrounding area. We walked around the house for a bit, but there was nothing particularly interesting, just dense trees everywhere. So we returned toward the house and were casually chatting in what appeared to be a former vegetable garden behind the property. Suddenly, Beth looked up and said, "Wasn't there someone over there just now?" Beth was pointing at a frosted glass window attached to the back of the house. Based on its location, it was probably the bathroom. She said someone had been peering at us from there. Wasn't it just one of the guys? Maybe they heard our voices and came to look. Beth tilted her head and said, I'm not sure, but it looked like a woman to me. The hair seemed long, and the clothes looked whitish. Stop it. None of the guys are wearing white clothes. Sorry, maybe I was seeing things. It's frosted glass, so it was just a blurry silhouette. It was probably one of the guys. Beth was laughing, but Amy and I suddenly felt scared and said, "Let's go back." We hurried back inside where the men were. I asked Chris, who was inside, "Did anyone use the bathroom just now?" All four men said they had used the bathroom at some point. "Did anyone look out the window?" "I didn't look outside," Chris replied. "What about you, David?" "Oh, I might have looked. I thought I noticed you girls were out there." So it was probably David. But David has blonde hair and he's wearing blue clothes. "What are you all talking about?" We explained what had just happened to the men. Everyone said that's creepy, but we concluded it must have been David after all. I thought so too, but Amy wasn't convinced. "Their clothes are completely different. How could you mistake that?" She felt something was off and seemed a bit frightened. Then our leader said, "I haven't heard anything strange about this house. Other people like us have borrowed it before, and there haven't been any weird stories. Besides, I met the grandmother who used to live here once, and she was just a normal, kind old lady. Plus, she didn't die in this house. She moved to a group home and passed away peacefully from old age, so there shouldn't be any curses or anything." This seemed to calm everyone down, and Amy finally said, "Well, I guess you're right." We had lunch with the boxed meals we'd bought, started drinking early, and spent time playing games together. Before we knew it, evening had arrived. Dinner was our main event, the barbecue. We all went out to the yard to start the fire and prepare the ingredients. When Amy, who had gone to use the bathroom, came back with a pale face. "Hey, did anyone go inside the house just now?" When Amy asked this, I replied, "No, everyone except you has been out here." "Really?" "When I was in the bathroom, someone knocked on the door. So I said yes, but then they knocked again. I thought it was strange, so I came out right away, but nobody was there." Amy said this with a disturbed expression. But indeed, all the other members were in the yard. "Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination?" I was getting scared too, so I asked. "Yes, but maybe it was just my imagination." Amy said this hesitantly, seeming uncertain. I could sense she felt it wasn't her imagination. But if it wasn't, that would be even scarier. So she wanted to believe it was just her imagination. "Let's keep this between us for now." Since Amy said that, I found it unsettling but didn't say anything more. Then the barbecue began. About 2 hours passed as we enjoyed the meat and drinks. I gradually started needing to use the bathroom. Having heard Amy and Beth's stories, I really didn't want to go to the bathroom, but I had been drinking and couldn't hold it any longer. When I reached my limit, I asked our leader to come with me and wait outside the bathroom. "Are you scared of ghosts?" Our leader teased me with a cheerful tone, which helped distract me a little. "You better stay right there." When we reached the bathroom, I said this to the leader with strong emphasis, before going inside. The bathroom had a Western-style toilet installed over a traditional Japanese squat toilet. In older Japanese homes, bathrooms often had squat toilets, and sometimes Western toilets were added later as renovations. It seemed like it had originally been an old-style outhouse, as there was a sharp, unpleasant smell lingering. I quickly finished my business, and just as I was about to leave, suddenly there was a knock on the door from outside. I startled for a moment, but immediately realized it must be our leader. "Hey, stop that," I called out. But then came another knock and I said, "Stop it." As I quickly tried to open the door and grab the handle, I suddenly realized something. Our leader hadn't heard Amy's story earlier, so why would he knock in the same way as in her story? Just as this chilling thought crossed my mind, I had a terrible premonition and instinctively turned to look at the small window in the bathroom. I clearly saw a white face peering through the frosted glass from outside, with only the eyes visible from below the window frame, staring directly at me. Wah! Wah! I screamed and tumbled out of the bathroom. Our leader, who was waiting outside, jumped back startled, saying, "Whoa!" I clung to him frantically. "There was someone outside just now." "Huh? Wasn't it just someone from our group outside? What about the knocking? You knocked, didn't you? What are you talking about?" Our leader insisted he hadn't knocked at all. "I definitely heard knocking. Someone was definitely there." Our leader tried to calm me down while leading me back to everyone else. When Amy saw me return half crying and heard what had happened, she said, "I knew something was wrong with this house." She looked like she was about to cry too. However, our leader didn't want to think of the house where the grandmother he knew had lived as being haunted, so he refused to believe us, saying the women were just panicking for no reason. Worse yet, he started getting excited, saying, "This is awesome. So scary, so scary. This is getting me pumped up. Let's tell ghost stories." Amy and I strongly objected, but the men and Beth, who said she liked scary stories, were in favor. Before we knew it, we were having a ghost story session. It was around 9 p.m. I think. In the pitch black mountains, illuminated only by camping lights, sitting around the barbecue fire telling scary stories. Normally I enjoy ghost stories, but at that moment, it felt like the worst possible situation. During the second or third story I couldn't take it anymore and said, "I really can't handle this," and stood up. But I didn't want to go inside the house alone either, so I headed toward the car parked nearby. From there, I could still see the lights and hear everyone's voices. I didn't really need anything specific, I just wanted to get some snacks or drinks from the car. Anything to avoid listening to those stories for even a few minutes. As I opened the trunk and rummaged through the luggage, I heard Amy's voice calling me from behind. "Hey there." I glanced back and caught a glimpse of Amy's feet approaching me in my peripheral vision. I thought Amy had also gotten scared and followed me, so while still searching through the luggage, I replied with just my voice, "Amy, this is really scary, isn't it?" "Hey there." Amy must have been frightened. She was approaching with a weak voice. "Amy, everyone's being so mean. I don't want to stay here anymore. I want to go home, don't you?" "Oh hey there. Are they still telling scary stories? What's the atmosphere like now?" "Ah, hey there." That's when I realized something was strange. Amy spoke in a completely emotionless, flat voice. "Everyone's gone." "What?" I thought, and spun around quickly, but there was only pitch black darkness spreading behind me. No one was there. Tears came to my eyes. This time I was genuinely crying as I sprinted back to everyone at full speed. I poured out my terror, telling everyone what had just happened all at once. Amy became terrified, and started making a huge fuss about wanting to go home. However, everyone had consumed quite a lot of alcohol, so driving now would mean drunk driving. We had no choice but to spend the entire night with all the house lights on, music blasting, forcibly drowning out our fear by playing games together with artificially high energy, waiting for morning to come. The next day, needless to say, we skipped the planned visit to the park and drove straight home. Later, our leader casually asked his friend who owned the house about it, but apparently there was nothing that came to mind. Amy remained deeply frightened after that incident and went to see a spiritual advisor or exorcist by herself. I was invited to go too, but I just wanted to forget everything, so I declined. According to what Amy heard from the spiritual advisor, it was likely that unrelated wandering spirits had taken up residence in the empty house. Nothing further happened to me after that experience. However, though I don't know if it's related to this incident, Amy suffered a serious accident the following month, injuring her leg badly enough to require several stitches. Maybe because she was so scared she attracted something to herself, our leader said casually, as if it had nothing to do with him. That comment personally frightened me more than anything else. The events at that remote mountain house remain a mystery to this day. But the house is still there. Every summer when the season comes around, I remember this true experience from my own life. Closing question. So what do you think really happened in that mountain house? Was it truly wandering spirits that had made the empty house their home? Or perhaps the memory of the grandmother, who had lived there for so many years, still lingered in those rooms? And what about Amy's accident the following month? Mere coincidence, or something more? Some experiences defy explanation, leaving us to wonder what forces might exist just beyond our understanding. Have you ever encountered something that made you question the boundary between the living world and whatever might lie beyond it? The mountain house still stands in those remote hills of Japan, waiting for the next group of visitors. What would you do if you found yourself staying there for the night?